Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Superstar Ultra. In the last part, we went through Dynablade, and now it's time for us to start off the Great Cave Offensive. Kirby finds himself lost in a deep cave full of peril and treasure. Find all 60 treasures and get out safely. Let's begin. And begin is the correct word to use there, because Great Cave Offensive onwards is where the game's mini-campaigns start to be a little less, well, mini, and be closer to multi-parts at the least. The longest I think one is from memory is 3 or 4, but they definitely get a bit longer moving forward. And right here is the gimmick of Great Cave Offensive. We are in this gigantic cave, and we're looking for treasure. As you can see down there on the bottom screen, there's 60 total. We just got our first one, the gold coin. A lot of the treasures are references, but you don't actively need to collect them all to beat Great Cave Offensive. You can just go to the end, and you can get the ending. In fact, I think you even get a line of dialogue from the game going, "You didn't collect a single one." It's almost impressive kind of deal. But if you want to get 100% in the game, you get all 60. Go figure. Each of the pieces of treasure have a gold value attached to them that means nothing. It's more just for extra flavor text. And a lot of the treasures are also references. For instance, this item here is going to be the whip. At the time when the original game was released, a lot of people figured that whip was a reference to the Belmont whip, vampire killer from Castlevania, but its name in the Japanese text is Indy's whip, so it's an Indiana Jones reference more than anything. This is also notably one of the only modes that technically requires the use of a helper in order to get 100%, because there's some treasures that require you pressing switches like this. And if you have the right type of helper enabled, they'll actively go press the switch for you. There are times like this where they want you to just kind of time your movement well to hit the switches correctly, though. This is where playing the game in proper two-player can come in handy, because you can just have the other person stand on the switch, but oh well. Now, what I find interesting about Great Cave Offensive overall is, in a lot of ways, it is a prototype for what Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, which I've already covered on the channel, would later be. It's sort of a very loose Metroid Kirby. With that said, despite my misgivings about how Amazing Mirror is structured, it's definitely closer to a Metroid in structure, because basically every pathway in in a Great Cave Offensive is a straightforward linear path. There's very little optional side stuff that just gets you extra treasures. There's no extra movement upgrades or anything. With all my things about saying how I wish Amazing Mirror had more mobility options and proper permanent upgrades besides just health, this is an even looser interpretation of that. And what I find interesting is, I'll get more into this when we get to the 6th campaign. I think there's tools in this game they could use to build a proper Metroidvania like Kirby when it comes to getting new powers to permanently upgrade yourself and get movement upgrades, but we'll talk more about that when we reach the 6th campaign. Very few of the treasures are one and done, because you can just re-enter the door and go back to a previous room in order to get a chest you may have missed. If anything, the biggest annoyance is sometimes how long it takes for rooms to reset, or in a lot of cases, towards the latter half of Great Cave Offensive especially, how many require a very specific power-up to nab. Admittedly, a problem that Amazing Mirror also would later have, so at least they're consistent with that. You need to learn the ins and outs of every power and how they can be used environmentally to get around stuff. For instance, you need to learn that things like fire, sword, and cutter can cut ropes. You can remember that fuses work the way they do with fire. You need to learn that stone can break a lot of blocks just because of its power. Exploring around here is key, but thankfully you don't have to worry about doing it in a single session. Because whenever you see a big star door, which is usually a goal in a lot of the other levels, in Great Cave Offensive in the next couple campaigns especially, they're save rooms, so you can always save your progress and just come back later. And you know, I like that. I like that a lot. So, a moment ago, we got the Screw Attack from Metroid as an item, another crossover. But notably, that thing is the first example of many items that had a different name in the Super Nintendo release, either due to mistranslations or other internal things being different at the time. It was known as the Screw Ball in the original Super Nintendo game, and that's a good segue as well to talk about the fact that several of the treasures were updated for Superstar Ultra. Either they had their names updated, their descriptions may have been changed a little bit if they have one at all. In the case of a couple of treasures, though, they were changed into different items outright, even with different values, even if it adds up to the same total. Phantom Mask, by the way, referencing Mario USA. The main thing that caused a lot of treasures to get changed was them being kind of redundant with other things at the time, or being updated to show what the series that they're referencing was like at that point in time. Additionally, several of them were changed into items to reference later Kirby games that were released between Superstar Ultra and Superstar Original. It's not a super major change, but I imagine if you were super used to the original game and played this, and played every Kirby game since the original Superstar, it was probably a nice little moment of, oh, that's cool, kind of deal. With that said, I'd also like to note, this is easily my worst performance in the LP. Great Cave Offensive. I thought I remembered it well, and overall I did. But it's definitely the portion of the game I practiced the least because of its relative length, so it's where I take the most hits, it's where I die the most, I think. And it's also where I do the most transitions for me trying to do something over and over again. Not just because of some of the puzzles being kind of tight, time sensitivity-wise, but just me kind of faffing about and just kind of saying stuff for a second going, yeah, did I miss something? And you can even see a little bit of that left in. Particularly when we get to the, on the bottom screen down there, fourth large section of the area, because the Great Cave Offensive is split up into, like, 4 major sections and 4 little transition moments. It's not super important which portion you're in, they're basically just mini levels and of themselves, but yeah, I probably should note that all the same. This is Mirror, by the way. Mirror's not that spectacular. The best thing it's got is, if you guard with it, I think you put up a projectile reflecting shield, which I want to say is also visually the base of the shields in Smash. The main thing I want to talk about with Mirror is, I think, I'm not sure if it was due to like space, time, or palette limitations on the Super Nintendo. A lot of the game's powers do basically use the exact same animation set, just with a different color set. For instance, Mirror is a recolored beam, visually, when it comes to, like, Kirby sprites. Bomb and Sword use the same elf hats, that's why Fire, Plasma, and Ice all use the headdress look. Ninja and Stone are basically identical. Fighter and Suplex both have headbands on. Wheel and Yo-Yo both use the baseball cap look. Parasol and Hammer are... Well, no, I guess Hammer does have the... I do not know the name of the little rope they tie around the head, but it's got that at least compared to Parasol. I think in the original game it didn't have a hat, though. And then there's... In the original game, the remaining 5 abilities, like Chef, like Crash, like Mike, those in the original game just made you flash white until you use them, and those are also the ones that are basically one and done to begin with. With that said, time for the boss of the sub-tree. This is Fatty Whale. Fatty Whale, I'm only now realizing, is wearing a sailor uniform for one, like a school uniform. Moves left and right across the screen, jumping all over the place, doing a couple different patterns, usually creating some amount of water or waves of rocks that fall from the ceiling. I want to say there's also an attack where it can jump from the background to do a splash on the ground, but I might be thinking of something else. The big thing with it is a lot of its movement makes the bottom half of the screen where you can stand basically uninhabitable because touching Fatty Whale is damage. So make sure you remember to fly over it to avoid any damage. This is actually where Jet can come in handy pretty easily, assuming you don't accidentally spit it out, for 2 reasons. For one thing, when you hover as Jet, you actively shoot out a plume of fire beneath you, like, you know, a jet engine. And while it doesn't do a lot of damage, for when Fatty Whale is just moving left to right, it can probably build up pretty quickly. But also, the big thing with Jet is you hold the button to charge up a horizontal charge forward, which is pretty good for traversal to begin with. But if you press the button while you're in the middle of a charge, you basically do, like, sort of like a short-range Kamehameha wave. And that can do a lot of damage to bosses and enemies. It's one of my favorite movement and ability techs in the game. In fact, I think in speedruns, Jet's generally used over wheel for a lot of just moment-to-moment movement, at least. I say I think because it's been a while since I watched one of those. My Kirby speedrunning friends haven't really been doing many Ultra runs, or I guess Superstar runs, period, the past little bit that I've seen at least. Between every major area of the Great Cave Offensive, I don't know what I'm about to say, the Great Subterranean, you have these little minecart sections. It's actually faster to run through them than to use the minecart, but that's just used to transition from one aesthetic to the other. Welcome to the Crystal area, which is the area I remember most in the Great Cave Offensive stage in Smash. The war crime that stage is. Crystal is where the methodology for a lot of the level design for Great Cave Offensive becomes more clear, as while they are all linear paths like I brought up last time, the later 3 sections of Great Cave Offensive have a distinct design mentality going on, where there's 3 linear paths that you go through, but only one of them actually leads to the end of the area. The other 2 are only there to get extra treasure chests. In, I think, every single case, the door that leads to the end is the one in the center, so if you just want to speed through it, go ahead. But I want to get all these delectable goodies to get some money and do nothing with them ever again. This is also where they start putting a few more troll moves in the treasure chest placements, like that. No way you're gonna know to stand right up in that pit to grab that chest on your first playthrough. But oh well, it doesn't take long to backtrack up here and enter the door and re-enter this area. So a few moments ago, I actually forgot to talk about it. We got 2 distinct treasures a few moments ago. One of them was the bandana. That is not only a reference to the bandana that Kirby wears when wearing Fighter, but its Japanese name is the Commando bandana, which is meaning it's probably a distinct reference to the Rambo movies. Bit weird to have Kirby reference that, but at the same time, I think there's a gif of him from not Superstar Ultra, from Right Back At Ya. It was probably one of the Japanese-only episodes where he's firing a gun into the air, so it's probably relatively on the nose. And we also, at the end of Sub-3, got the Season's Heart. That is a combo treasure. In the original Superstar, you didn't get the Season's Heart there, you got the Springtime Heart. They removed all of the 4 main seasonal hearts, springtime, wintertime, summertime, and autumn time, and just combined them all into one treasure here in Superstar Ultra, and they replaced the later 3 hearts with some of those new ones I talked about, some of those new treasures I talked about earlier. In fact, I think we're coming up on the first one relatively soon? I forget if it's in either of these side paths or on the main path here in Crystal. Fish fossil. Tasty. Beast fossil. Probably also tasty. But don't eat fossils, they're made of rock. They were once food, no longer. I should note, this was also another one of those games I wanted to do with my buddy Scott at some point. But me realizing I wanted to do Ultra made that a little more complicated, because the only way to play Ultra multiplayer is by using DS Download Play or something similar. There's no inherent 2 players 1 system thing like there was on the Super Nintendo, so a little limiting. That there is the machine parts. That is another item that was changed for Superstar Ultra. In the original game, that was a pair of nunchucks. In particular, it was known as Lee's nunchucks in the Japanese text, so distinct reference to Bruce Lee. But the machine parts there are a part of the Hydra from Kirby's Air Ride. The lesser memorable airship from that. Air Ride's a weird game for me. I didn't have it growing up. I only played that with a friend here or there, maybe rented it from my library from memory, maybe a Blockbuster. I liked it, but I was definitely more a fan of some of the Air Ride machine designs than anything else. The Dragoon in particular. The Hydra at the time just felt too villainous to me. The Dragoon definitely fits Kirby's aesthetics overall more. Great Cave Offensive, though, is a bit of a weird part of the game to me. Because it's the only one that sort of got expanded into its own full game in Amazing Mirror, just about. And I really always kind of wish they did that for some of the other ones. Well, I guess now Gourmet Race sort of did with that one on the Switch where you roll around. But it kind of goes into one of my main complaints with Superstar. By the way, the bucket is a distinct reference to a Japan-only Mario game, Mario and Wario, which was a game I believe that used the SNES mouse. I've never actually played it, and I think that's also where the blue hat and shirt, red overalls Mario design came from memory. Where was I? The mini campaigns. I really wish some of the mini campaigns here just got more time to make their mechanics work out. Because sometimes you just start them and they're over like that. And that works in a way for the omnibus format. But then I get to like what the final mini campaign is in the original game and just wish it was more of that. And I hope someday we get more games that expand on those mechanics. By the way, the power paintbrush there is an item that was changed for Superstar Ultra. In the original game, I believe that was the Summertime Heart. But now it's a power paintbrush, which is a distinct reference to Dracia's paintbrush from Kirby and the Canvas Curse. The Kirby DS game I put the most time into overall, actually. I distinctly remember watching those weird-ass commercials where Kirby dates that finger and thought, yes, this is a game I wanted to play for some reason. Yeah, like, I played all three of the major Kirby DS releases between Canvas, this, and Squeak Squad, but Canvas Curse for some reason is just the one I played the most of over the years. Especially back when the DS was, like, my major handheld. I kind of completely ignored Mass Attack existed. In fact, I don't even remember any ads for it at the time. That could be a consequence, though, of there being, I think, 2 Kirby games that year, and that was, like, the first instance of that. If not period, then in a while? A little weird to look back at. Though, I say that, but Kirby's probably had, like, the most consistent life cycle out of any of the Nintendo franchises because it's got its own dedicated developer just about. Gee, I wonder who the Falcon helmet's referencing, right, guys? Like, a lot of the other Nintendo franchises, they kind of get bounces between releases because they're usually from one of, like, the 3 main Nintendo teams nowadays. But Kirby's almost always been developed by HAL Labs and the people over at Sora here and there, I think, whenever Sakurai gets directly involved. And because of that, we just got a lot of time where they consistently made Kirby games and gave the franchise time to breathe, but also just a lot of content. The last item we got, by the way, just there was the cell phone. In the original Kirby Superstar, that was a bomb dud. Like, it looked like the Fat Man nuke bomb, and it was just a dud. The cell phone is a distinct reference to the one that you use in Amazing Mirror. I actually prefer that as an item there than the bomb, because the bomb's weirdly dark compared to the rest of the game's treasures. Not to say Kirby's not dark, but compared to the rest of the treasures in this particular game in particular. With that said, we've now gotten every single treasure here in Crystal, so it's time for us to head over to the boss fight. A little annoying that the second of the 4 main areas doesn't end off at 30 treasures, but oh well. Time for one of the coolest boss fights, but one of the most annoying ones, and this is me going, nah, I want Chip instead of Wing. Wing kinda sucks. Barring its jump being an attack itself. This is... I can't remember the name of this boss fight outright. Computer Virus. It's known as Battle Windows in the Japanese version, but the main reason they believe it was changed was to make it seem like it was less a joke about PCs. And this boss is a little different than most. For one thing, it's fought in multiple phases all at once. You actually get to see its main HP value, which is how I think we have actual damage values for basically every attack, unless it's inconsistent, which I hope it's not. This boss's visual design is a distinct in-joke and reference to the game's development, because this game was partially developed on old Apple Macintosh computers, and it was apparently the first time Sakurai and his staff had used a computer type like that in game development, so they just made this boss be a little reference to the windows of it. Kinda cute, kinda funny, but ultimately the boss isn't much to write home about. each individual phase does have its own attack pattern, but if you actually just stand in like either extreme corner of the map and hold the guard button, you'll probably avoid damage. I really underestimate the usefulness of the guard. It's most useful, I find, in like the boss rush stuff down the line. But it can be surprisingly useful in the moment. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're gonna continue through Great Cave Offensive, not quite finishing off in the process, but getting a lot of the way through it. See you guys then.